So I'm having a lot of success selling stuff on Craigslist and Facebook. In case you were wondering.
Can you sell 4 tires for me?
Yeah.
Yep, for real.
Yeah.
They're in my garage. They came on my truck. They're too big now.
Well, but wait. So Randy is in the market for a new car because Kate is going to get her license. Mm-hmm. And I think we're looking at the Lexus GXs, the smaller, like the second smallest SUV. And the reason why is because they look so pimp with big tires and like a leveling kit and a roof rack on the top. Like they're seriously legit. So would they fit on that kind of car?
No.
Damn it.
No, it's truck tires. I'm Josh Sigman, and I'm a mortgage lender. I'm also a geek for money, not just earning it and saving it, but literally everything about it. I love that money has rules. It has its truths. I love investment strategies, and I love making money work for us. For so many, money is emotional. For me, it's logical, like a puzzle. My passion is also helping others with their money. I love looking at people's finances, dissecting their puzzle, and rebuilding with strategy and purpose, and I'm really good at it. I'm making this podcast about my money strategies, not the things that are written in books or sold in programs. It's a podcast outlining the lessons I've learned and used for the past 15 years. These strategies help me and those who use them save more, give more, create wealth, and retire early. Let me teach you how to build your net worth. You ready? Welcome to Sigman Sense. All right, welcome back to another episode of Sigman Sense. We're going to have a good conversation today about, we had a viewer ask an interesting question that was worth a long conversation about, which is how do you budget when you don't have a fixed income?
Yeah, I always find this it's
very, a lot easier when you have a salary for
100%.
sure.
So I think, there's a lot that can be uncovered about this for
and
sure.
Unwound.
Grab
a little string and pull it.
Absolutely. Layer off the onion.
Yeah, so I got in an argument about this with somebody not too long ago. So it's actually interesting that you had a separate question on it. Yeah.
Oh, funny.
And it's basically the whole thing of it's easier said when you have a salary, but when we don't know when money's coming and going, you can't really budget. And I would argue the exact opposite.
Of course you would.
Well, first of all, I would argue because I like to argue. But second of all, it's more important to budget when you don't know when the next paycheck's coming.
Well, that is very true.
Right. Sorry. You're just not that exciting today.
I mean, God.
That was a bad joke. I'm sorry.
First of all,
yeah. So
never true.
Never true. So my point is that what was your friend's example? Your friend works in trains, right?
For the railroad. So he could be working for 3 months and then not again for 2 months.
Okay.
But I think the same could be said really for anyone. Commissioned.
Realtors are a great example.
Realtors are a great example, but people that are commissioned only, oil field people that are,
Yep.
I mean, there's just so many examples. Self-employed people.
How about everyone's watched Deadliest Catch, right? They're going to go out and crush it for 6 weeks.
That's where they catch the crab, right?
Yeah. The job I'll never do, by the way.
I will never
Cold
do.
Water and
thank
me
you,
don't go
people,
very far.
for doing that because I am a crab lover.
Yep. So this is where this all goes to. So all those examples, and maybe this fits in your life. You could be a bartender too, right? I mean, you could have had a decent income for the last couple of years, and March sucked, April sucked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my starting point is that you always budget. I don't care how much or how little you make. You always budget. I don't care if you have a consistent income or you don't. You always budget. And if I don't beat that into people's heads, then the rest of this whole show is a damn failure.
Right.
Because there's things that are going to be required regardless of whether you have the income or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like rent at a very minimum, rent or
Yep.
mortgage at a very minimum. You got to live somewhere unless you're living with mommy and daddy, and even mommy and daddy eventually start saying, "Hey, your room costs $500, right?"
Yep.
So managing whatever expenses you have is the key, and if you don't really track it well, then you're still going to get in trouble no matter what. So I had 6 or 7 points that I think are the most important things, and some tips in there too of how to manage it.
Okay.
But I don't want to skip over the first 10 episodes, right? Which are all basically that you got to track everything. You got to know when your money's coming in, what's going out. And even if the money coming in is zero, you still have expenses going
Still
out,
have
right?
expenses,
Whether it's
right.
life insurance or health insurance or car payments or car insurance or house payment or whatever else, you still have to track it. So I think tip one, most expensive thing is that especially if you're on a shoestring budget, whatever that means to you, that the number one thing you got to manage is manage for the lowest expenses. Like, cause you know, I think about a realtor. The realtor might go literally 3 months making no money. And then all of a sudden they make $30,000 in a month. Right.
Right.
So, then you ask, of course, that realtor on that month, like, how much do you make? And they say, well, 30,000. No. You made $10,000 a month for the last 3 months.
Correct.
Right. And that's a decent agent at that point. But my point in saying that is that you can't control the upsides, like the railroad guy that you were talking about can't control when he's going to get called up for another couple months. The crab guys cannot tell you how much of a haul they're going to be bringing this season.
Gotcha.
You think about all those funny, great TV shows like Wicked Tuna and all the tuna fishermen. Like, you can't pick when the 1,000-pound tuna bites versus the 300-pound tuna, right?
Right.
And that applies to everything that's got a fluctuating income, even small business owners. Whether it's a online retail shop or it's a small boutique shop in downtown Fredericksburg, they still have this kind of fluctuating income. So the one thing you can control is managing to the lowest expense.
Managing to the lowest
right.
expense.
So that's what you would start with, in my personal opinion, is managing to that. The second biggest point then is that, especially when you have an inconsistent income.
So managing to the lowest expense, meaning that you take, at worst case scenarios, for everything to be paid.
Yep.
So essentially is you're identifying your survival number?
This is where you just don't allow yourself to get locked into long-term monthly payments that are high, right? Like,
okay.
I have to choose, if I've got a fluctuating budget, I have to choose the $250 car payment, not the $500. I'm managing to the lowest expense. I've got to be safe about, even though I want, and most of the time I feel comfortable, if I make $30,000 every 3 months, as a realtor, as an example, in theory, $10,000 a month, no problem at all buying $250 sales price. Well, I would choose lower. I would choose a lot lower because I want to manage to the lowest expense.
Okay. So this is really choosing wisely what you're going to purchase.
Yeah. Especially for the fixed ongoing expenses. Now, there are things that I'm less concerned with that you can manage out of, right? Like a gym membership as an example, or the recurring things for, TV shows, Apple TV and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because those have no contracts. But I think what I'm trying to point out is any long-term contracts, you've got to make sure those are managed to the lowest expense, right? You just can't be willy-nilly with it, because it doesn't take long to get in trouble. I've got a dear friend of mine that got furloughed early on in this whole mess, and he had the reserves to go through 3 months. But then the furlough got extended another 3 months. Right. And so, he's having to make some very difficult life choices.
That's really hard, because by the book, he did everything right.
He did everything right. Yep.
Had his safety net, had his float accounts, all that.
Best laid plans.
Right.
Best laid plans.
Yeah.
So, what he's been doing, and he's done it better than most, is he made some choices early about what to cancel early. But the whole point is you just last longer in case of emergency button gets hit. Yeah. By managing the lowest expense. So that's the first step. So when you move on past that, unfortunately, the second thing I want to point out is, for the most part, this is the group of people, if they've got fluctuating income, they probably have 1099 income or small business income. Or commission income. And the second biggest thing is you gotta have a tax account. You've got to manage for the taxes. Yes. So one of the problems that, I'll use that realtor example again, is they go month 1 and 2 with no income. So they might be throwing some extra money on credit cards, probably living outside their means a little bit. All of a sudden they have a rocking month and they make $10,000 or $30,000 in that month. Well, the first 35% is going to the IRS. Whether they like it or not, right? Just because they had $30,000 hit the checking account doesn't mean it's their $30,000.
But I think people do that, though.
100% they do.
You're right.
Because they don't budget and they don't separate their accounts.
Or it's needed. So it probably, my guess would be that it gets into this mindset cycle of, I need it because I'm behind in these certain areas, so I will make it up next time I have a big check, or the next time I have a big income month, I'll double or I'll cover what I missed.
Well, and that's the problem, is people make decisions in the best of times, not the worst of times. Some of the TikTok followers got a pissing contest with me because of 15 years versus 30 years, right? And the truth of the matter is, get a 30-year mortgage. Like, overpay it. Don't get a 15-year mortgage. I don't know what else to say because you're managing the fixed expense, right?
Yeah.
Why do people make that 15-year choice most often is because they're having a really great year or 2 or 3. And I clearly there's a point where you have enough cash reserves. You've got a job of 15 years, enough cash reserves. I'll say this 30 times. Enough cash reserves. You can refinance back out of it to a 30 if you needed to. So yes, there's a time and place to do 15-year mortgages. But for the lion's share, when people are starting off, they don't have reserves. Let's go back to that point. Then you do a 30-year mortgage for the lowest fixed expense.
And overpay if you want.
So, but going to this thought process is what I was trying to say is people make decisions in the best of times. I try to make decisions assuming the worst of times.
I love that quote so much.
Well, there's a great book that starts that way. It's the best of times, it was the worst of times. It's Tale of Two Cities, one of the best books of all time. So yes, I'm stealing some literary remarks, but yeah, you've got to make decisions with the worst of times in mind. And so exactly what you just said is spot on. So let's just use that example of $30,000 paycheck after 3 months of no paycheck. They might have charged up their credit cards a little bit. God forbid they want to change their life, right? The way that they operate and run. So now they just, they want to pay off all their credit cards and get back to square one because they assume that, hey, I had a big month. I'm pulling myself out of this. I'll have a big month next month as well. Well, so you don't know what size tuna you're going to catch next month, right?
Right.
So you just have to remember if your income is fluctuating, that is literally not your money. The 35% off the top or 30%, whatever your tax bracket is, a better way to say it, it's literally not your money. So
this is hard too, because this is what we talk about. Bumper pads are so important for me personally. And being able to have, so a bumper pad for me is that shit's already, what is wrong with this? It's already taken care of. It's already taken out of my account. The savings is already taken out of my check. It's already taken care of. I don't have to actually pull the trigger, push the button. But
your husband gets variable income. That's you gotta have tax money set aside.
Right. Exactly. Which is what we need. We need to talk about that. But this is hard. It's hard. It's a mindset of doing the right thing, even though it sucks. Like pulling off 35% of your income and having to manually go through that action. That's very difficult. So it takes a lot of discipline and mindset.
You just have to remember it's not your money. And I'll give you another example of a different friend of mine, a very close friend of mine, another friend, right? So variable income, commission income, had a great run for a lot of years, had a really bad 1 year, right? The problem was that the great run with the good years, what ended up happening was he was putting money in paychecks and doing some different spending habits, and he owed the IRS a lot of money. And then he was going to pay it off the next year, but the next year was the year that the income fell. Well, just because your income went down this year doesn't mean you don't owe last year's taxes, right? So what invariably happens, at some point the IRS comes and gets your shit. At some point the IRS will do a tax lien against the property, or they'll garnish your wages, or there's lots of different things that the IRS can do. So the only way to approach it is, it's not my money. So get rid of it, get it out of harm's way, minute one, right?
Immediately.
And so that's a major budgeting issue for a lot of people, is they don't separate it. It's like the separation of church and state. They've got to be different accounts. So get that money out of where you can see it, where you can spend it, just get it sent off. I'm a K1 income earner, right? Which is separate of a couple other incomes, but K1 income is, if you own corporations or LLCs or limited partnerships, specifically limited partnership for me is where my K1 comes from. And so the K1 income comes in as a fractional owner, and that's a lump sum deposit. Well, when my company is doing really, really well, that can be a really big check, right? And I'm not immune to it. Like I can go do bad stuff with money, with bad choices. I want to, for sure. But the first thing I have to do, in fact, it's funny, on the way over to the office this morning, I found out on Friday that we're going to get a distribution of one of my K1s for the previous quarter. And I literally called Katie and said, I'm worried because our year is up this year that I'm under collecting for taxes. So please let my CPA know immediately, because I want to, like, when that money hits in September, I want to write a check to the IRS day one.
I mean, get it out of your...
I don't want to, there's a false sense of security when you
Yeah.
look at it, right? So I think I'm done beating the tax horse
so setting
to
up
death.
your tax accounts.
But setting up a separate account for taxes if it's not taken out of your paycheck.
Is this literally a bank account or
a
is
money
this
market or
okay?
something.
Okay.
Or just literally send it. I don't know what to say. Like quarterly, you should be sending taxes anyways if you owe it quarterly. A lot of people wait till the end of the year and see what the CPA says. It's like,
I see.
wait a second. Like that's not how you're supposed to do it.
Got it.
If you have 2 years in a row, you've got to average off the previous year and you should be paying in taxes on that quarterly basis based on what you would have owed last year, assuming it's going to move forward this year. But if your income is going up, so congratulations, your business is doing better, or you are doing a better sales job, or your realtor business is building, you should be setting more aside for the taxes, because that's where people get in trouble is they're collecting based on what they paid in last year, not fully understanding the repercussions of making more money this year. Now, at the end of the year, they've spent all the money, and then the tax lady calls and says, hey, you owe this much for taxes. And you're like, holy shit, I don't have it.
Right.
Because I spent it.
But if you're doing 35% of your income,
It's a pretty
what's on your
safe number.
check, then how does that not?
Because everyone's tax bracket is different. I think the highest one.
Gotcha.
You're
Okay.
right. That
Yeah.
you can get in the 40s in Texas anyways. And then you add in some state income tax for some viewers that are in different states. Like California's highest rate effectively is over 50%. By the time you add in state income tax for California,
Gotcha.
you do full for IRS for federal, and then you add in another almost 10% for California. 50 cents of every dollar is gone. You get to pay for everyone else. By the way, this is why I am somebody that believes in capitalism. Like, you want people to make lots of money because those people pay for the taxes. Those taxes pay for the roads and for the city governments. Those taxes pay for the cops and the army, and those taxes pay to give out the handouts to people that can't take care of themselves, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in capitalism, the opportunity to make a lot of money, because those people pay a lot of taxes. I guarantee you, I pay a lot of taxes.
Yeah.
I don't try to hide from it. I pay a lot of taxes, right? So tax bills.
Okay.
The third thing, okay? So let's just say that you have a house, okay? And you've been there for a period of time. One tool that I think is underutilized, but if done the right way is very smart, is getting a HELOC, a home equity line of credit.
Oh, we talked about this for me.
Yeah. When you have equity, it's the only way it works. So different states are different in what the maximum is. But in Texas, as an example, you can take out a loan to value of up to 80% of the value of your property. Okay. So a HELOC, HELOC, is considered a home equity line of credit. What I like about it is you can apply for it in the good times, but you can pull on it in the bad times.
Okay.
Right. So let's just say, for easy numbers, somebody had a $200,000 house. They only owed $100,000 on it. 80% of 200 is 160. Then in theory, they can get up a $60,000 home equity line of credit. Okay. So $100,000 mortgage or payoff plus a $60,000 home equity line of credit's 160. 160 is 80% of $200,000 appraised value.
Okay.
Okay. So I apply for, in the good times, when I don't need it, the HELOC. Okay. Because guess when you can qualify?
Right.
In the good times. So now I've got access to that cash that's in my property when I don't need it. Now, the point is, this is the in case of emergency button that I can push.
Right.
Okay. So now I've got this HELOC that I qualified for while I've got my job, not when I'm furloughed or whatever. Right. And in the event of emergency, where the train guy, he can utilize a couple $1,000 to pay
Cover
for
bills
his bills or mortgage, make sure things are going hunky-dory. And then when he gets his income, yes, pay taxes first, but then he can use that to pay down the HELOC.
So this twists up my brain. So you have your $60,000 and you get that money. It goes into a
no. It's a line of credit.
A line of credit.
So think of like a credit card tied to your house.
Okay. So if
you apply, you've got a $6,000 credit limit with a zero balance day one.
Okay. How do you use it?
Everyone's a little bit differently.
Okay.
But basically, this day and age, digitally, you can access the money within 24 hours.
Okay. So you call them and say, hey, can you put $2,000 in my account?
Exactly right.
Okay.
Every bank's a little different.
So I need $2,000. I transfer that into my account. Then that's when the payments start.
And you're paying interest only on the amount that's drawn. Right. So now
interest on $2,000.
So you're not on $2,000, not on $60,000.
Okay.
Exactly right. So it's variable. Most HELOCs are variable rates most of the time. So while rates are really low, it's really smart. You got to watch it. You don't want to carry a balance, and you certainly don't want to eat up your equity by buying stupid shit with your $60,000.
Because if you do a HELOC with that $60,000, well, what if you want to go do a cash out? Can't.
You'd refinance them together.
Okay.
Right. You refinance them together.
Okay.
But I think the point is for the topic of how do you budget when it's variable, that's something you can tap into to bridge a gap until your next big paycheck.
And
right?
so the payment that you make, now that I have my $2,000, that next month I'm going to have an interest only payment
on the $2,000.
On the $2,000.
Not on the $60,000.
And I pay that until I've paid back my $2,000.
Well, interest only. So you could carry the $2,000 balance and definitely paying interest on it. But when you get your $30,000 realtor paycheck,
right,
you can write a check for the $2,000 and go back to zero.
And
it's not closed. So now I've got a zero balance again, and you can keep this for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, forever. And so it's when you need it, you can tap into it. You think about a great example would be for a younger couple, right? That doesn't have the ability to drop a $14,000 check on an AC.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, it is your house. You still need the AC for sure as shit in Texas when it's 108 degrees. So you can go get that with a HELOC. Now you're paying interest only on your $14,000. You weren't planning on that expense.
Right.
And then as your paychecks kind of progress over a year, 3 or 5, you pay it off. Right.
Okay.
Now, worst case scenario, let's say that the tides have gone against you permanently. Your job is being Uberized or your commission sales are going down or whatever, and you don't adjust your fixed expenses fast enough. Worst case scenario is you sell your house. But when you sell your house, it pays off the principal and the HELOC.
Okay.
So, and you're pretty well insulated because at least in Texas, there's that 20% that you can't access anyways. So you should be able to get out of your house scot-free, right?
Okay.
Older couples, I think it's very smart for going into retirement because there can be expenses that, you've got in theory in retirement, you have your lowest income and it's typically fixed, whatever it is, Social Security, pension, or you're drawing off your retirement accounts, right? It's at the lowest point of your career. So my point is that before you retire, get that HELOC. So you've got that because, probably the biggest expense in for elderly is medical expenses, right? So yes, it can be covered depending on the type of insurance or Medicare or Medicaid. But if you've got some means, you're gonna have to cover deductibles or things like that, which can be super damaging. When you're older, I mean, the frequency of it.
So would you consider this your 3 months worth of living expenses?
No. This is the emergency. This is punch the ticket of I need help.
Okay. So ideally you would have your 3 to 6 months of
and that was going to
living.
be the third one, which is a higher reserve balance.
Okay. Cool.
When you've got a variable income.
So this is not in place of, this is like extra safety net.
Yep. Absolutely. It goes back to, the third point that I really wrote down is you've got to make sure that your reserves are larger than average.
Okay. This would be actually number 4 because HELOC was number 3.
I went from reserves taxes or budget taxes, HELOC reserves would be number 4. You're right. Okay. So number 4 for reserves. So we always talk about how if your salary, 3 months is pretty doable, right? As long as
your survival number.
Of your survival number.
Which just to go over that definition again, the survival number is what is the cost that it takes every single month for you to keep the lights on and pay
the fixed recurring bills.
Yes. Like,
to make your world go
this
round.
is not the excessive stuff. This is how do I keep the lights on, people fed, and a roof over their head. This is okay.
And the typical answer prior to 2020 would have been 3 months survival. I think in one of the episodes we talked about probably in April, go to 6 or 12.
Yeah. Well, and you did separate the difference between W-2 employees and self-employed or commissioned. And really the number should be closer to 9, if I remember correctly, is what you said about
longer, more. It's not always possible. And that's why the HELOC kind of comes in as an option. But it really goes back to when you think about worst case, like I always talk about the D's, right? The D's are always the bad one. Drinking, drugs, divorce, disability, and death. Those ones will screw up your finances real quick.
Yeah.
I wish that furloughs would be another D word, but it's not. So let's do add that one in there as well. It's the unexpected. So when I think about reserves, you also have to think about your re-employability. So let's talk about that concept for a second, right? So I've got a really good friend of mine whose mother is in her 60s. And she had a 14-year management job at a major retail company that everyone knows the name of, that I will not say. That major retail company is don't care about people.
Ugh.
This older lady, beautiful older lady who's young at heart, does not have the ability to pick up the stuff that she could pick up when she was in her late 40s and early 50s.
Yeah.
And they used this whole down cycle as an opportunity to get rid of her, right?
Yeah.
So now you're in the middle of the pandemic and you're a 65 years old woman whose last 15 years of employment was in, labor in retail, right? Like the back office kind of stuff, the, back management. So what's the reemployability?
Right.
Longer than average.
Yeah.
That's the answer. I don't know what the answers, of course, there's a spot for any hard worker.
Sure.
Given enough time and, but you gotta have enough time to do it. And the income, especially if there's a change of job, occupation, certainly duties, it's not all transferable.
Exactly.
So the income might be decreasing. And so with all that being said, that's why it's just say reserves. It's really interesting now going into the fifth month of the pandemic here, right? There are some super big winners and losers in this environment, right? You've got
that's what's so interesting.
It's like there's no in between. It's like you fell on the right side of the equation or you fell on the wrong side of the equation, right?
So, and there's people that can do everything normal, like nothing really has changed
at all,
or it's gotten better. And then others that is complete devastation
and chaos.
And which I think is why there's so many people that argue the point of, you really can't judge people on how they feel about the pandemic. You can't, judge how they feel about social distancing or self-quarantine, isolation. You can't, because everybody is in such a different season of their life with different circumstances that we're not all in the same boat, unfortunately. And it was just very, you have to really be sensitive to that stuff.
I don't want to quote the exact number. I think I know off the top of my head, but of the Fortune 500 companies is a very, 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 very small percentage that are crushing it. But they're crushing it so big that they're kind of carrying the weight of the Fortune 500. But the majority of them are sucking gas right now.
Yeah. Ugh.
Like not good. But it's the obvious things. It's basically anything internet, Apple, Amazon, anything that's delivery of food or goods to your doorstep, anything that makes your ability to social distance easier.
Yeah.
Zoom meetings, Zoom, the company, all those companies have been freaking crushing it.
Yeah.
And so many others are losing big, right?
Yeah.
And so the reason why I bring that up is that's why I kind of tie back into, if you've got a great job right now and things are going really well, don't spend your money. Build your reserves.
Be saving. Yeah.
And there's two reasons, and I'll say this too, as a business owner to business owners, or just because it makes sense, and then also it applies to the CEO of your household too, right? So the reason why I'm sacking away cash right now is twofold as a business owner. The first answer is that I do believe that there will be opportunity to invest in different areas in the next 18 months. So what are those opportunities? Whether it's the stock market crashing again, or whether that's in real estate that somebody has to sell because they can't afford it anymore because they lost their company, or whether that is in buying another business that is suffering. There's definitely going to be opportunity on the horizon for cash. But I also, because I think in terms of worse times, I also think for my own company.
Sure.
Just because things are going great right now does not mean they're going to be great in 18 months.
Absolutely.
And so I want to, in the words of like the movie or the TV show Survivor, outwit, outlast, outplay. The outlast part is have lots of freaking cash reserves for the company and for my personal situation.
Yeah. Because
I don't have to outlast everybody. I just have to outlast the majority of mortgage companies, because if most of them go away, there'll be plenty of need for me, right? So that's my reason about cash. And it's the same thing for the CEO of a household, right? One question I posed to some of my coaching students, you were on one of the calls actually, was I look back at 2007, 8, and 9. And I was a younger man at the time. I'm still young, damn it. Middle-aged.
I'm just kidding.
Well,
you're very young.
You're
young at heart, at least.
I did start to gray out. When I turned 40. But my point is that I think about a lot right now, and I assigned it to my coaching students. It's what do you miss out on back in 08, 09.
I mean, this has my head twisted
Right. What
up.
do you miss out on the last 90 days?
Yeah.
And so what do you not want to miss out on the next 90 days, right?
Exactly.
So I think back on, so I was in real estate already back in 2008. And man, I wish that I had cash reserves. You know, I could have bought half of San Antonio for a 50% discount, it seems like, compared to what they're worth right now, obviously. And, you know, if you don't have the cash set aside, then you just can't do it. But then you look at the last, 120 days. So not that I'm suggesting for people to go invest in individual stocks right now, but you know, if you invested in Tesla back in November, you freaking crushed it. If you invested in Amazon or Apple or some of these other companies, you crushed it. Zoom was such an obvious one.
And right? I missed it.
Right. Well, I missed it. Right.
Well,
I literally went from a company that does everything face to face, all meetings, everything, to I haven't had this is my one meeting a month.
Right.
With you or every week, I guess.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I don't have any interaction with my team, with my clients, with my agents, other than phone and Zoom. Right. Well, that was stupid that I didn't invest in Zoom as soon as it started, because it's like my entire company shifted, and lots of companies did.
Yeah.
Separate of that, so
they went straight to the top of the charts with as far as what online, what video platform you're going to use. It is just an overwhelming, like there's no question. It's just Zoom.
Yep.
I mean, and there's a lot of others.
What's cool is my clients that would, think older clients that would never do a Zoom meeting 6 months ago. Dude, I've got 75, 85-year-old clients. They're jumping on Zoom meetings with me, and I'm waving at them because I did their loan 10 years ago, and I get to see them again. And it's like, man, I want to hug you, but I can't do it, right? My point in saying this is what if you think that way like I do, what should you be looking for? What's the next thing for the next 6 months if you have extra cash reserves?
I know it's
you don't have cash reserves, it doesn't apply because we got a budget. So let's move on. Another trick I used to do myself. So this is one I know for sure helped out for this, because in insurance sales, same thing. Every other month I was getting a $0 paycheck, right? And it took some time to get that building. I would always pay ahead on my rent or pay ahead of my mortgage.
Oh, okay.
Right. Like of all things, I want to make sure I was for sure covered.
Yeah.
That $1,000 a month rent.
That's smart.
Need to be done.
So boom, here's 2 months.
Here's 2 months.
We're good.
Right.
Okay.
And then when things kept going well, great. Paying ahead on your mortgage, the one key you have to make sure of is there's 2 ways to do this. You're either paying ahead of payment or you're applying towards principal reduction. So what I'm saying is actually paying a month ahead or 2 months ahead, not applying towards principal reduction. So when you do your online payment or you make a phone call,
notate that, right?
Make sure you're doing it the right. You don't want it to apply towards principal reduction if this is what you're trying to do for your inconsistent income stream. It's just get ahead a few months. You can do the same thing with cars. If you.
So how does that work if it's a mortgage and you pay 2 months? Do you have to say this is 2 months worth at the time of payment so they won't hit you for late?
Exactly right. And then what happens, same thing with cars, your next statement date will show some crazy month in the future. So now that's bad when you're trying to overpay to reduce the principal. So you got to separate this in your mind. This is for budgeting on inconsistent paychecks, pay ahead. If you have the cash, you're not worried about it. You're not worried about floating money, and you want to overpay your mortgage, you have to make sure it's notated that you're doing additional principal reduction. That way it takes term off the life of the loan. And overpayment takes term off. A extra payment or paying ahead, if you instead of having a payment in July, you're having one in August or September.
So the biggest fear there is that you would get hit for a late payment or a missed payment if it's applied
towards principal and you just don't pay for 3 months, you're getting late payments.
So the other thing you could do, I'm assuming, is making that payment to yourself in a savings account.
You could do that. Yep.
If you had the discipline enough.
This goes back to at that time in my life, money in my hands was being spent.
Right.
And so
that's the asterisk. If you have the discipline enough.
If you have the discipline
to not touch it.
That's the same reason why to this day I want to get rid of tax money as soon as I can because
the boat I live in. I'm like, I need all the bumper pads I can get. Don't let me see it because I just can't be trusted.
Yep. Any questions about that one before we go to the next point?
I don't think so. Pay ahead on what you can. So this is rent, mortgage, cars.
Just the basics that you for sure need. Like the things that you would not let go. Get that
or is another way to look at it, what would have the biggest effect on your credit if missed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, because you don't want to You don't want this situation to now cause future problems, and you can't refinance. You can't buy something new. Like
another good one actually that's easy to do this way. That's bite size is paying your insurance a year in advance. Because insurance, you're going to have a car, whether it's a shitty car or a nice car, you're going to have a car for the next 12 months. So get it out of the way. Like I always opt for annual payment on car and house because you save money. If you look at the billing cycles, you pay more for monthly, you pay less for quarterly, you pay less for semi-annual, you pay less for annual. So I save money anyways, and I'm going to have the insurance. So that's
interesting.
Yeah. So you pay it out in advance and you just don't have to worry about it anymore.
We're actually looking at changing auto insurance right now. So maybe I will look at that.
Look at paying it in advance. So if you have a good month, then pay it up and be done with it. The key, the problem there is making sure that you have a reminder in your calendar of when your next payment's due. Yeah. You're going to get the letter in the mail, but how many of us at this point miss letters in the mail, right?
Yeah. But that's also like that could be roll into whether you escrow your taxes and insurance or not, right? Because you just pay.
Yep, it's not an option if it's included already, but car insurance, absolutely,
for
right?
sure. Cool.
Other things I think are super important because you still want to spend money. This was in one of the topics that we were kind of tossing around, which is, okay, I'm making money. When can I spend it?
When can I spend all this?
Right.
That's what I get hung up on. I'm like, well, I'm broke again from saving. Like, am I ever going to get to spend any of this?
My answer there is you have to actually create a vacation account or a spending account, right? Like something totally separate again that you can fill up. And when it's filled, then you do it. Because the grind is the grind. And we talk about this all the time and it's real and budgeting sucks. No one really likes it. I don't like it. I do it because it's important. It's kind of like, and this is a analogy I've been thinking about a lot, but it's so true, is like, I don't really love brushing my teeth, but I still do it twice a day. Right. Because it's good for you. Like otherwise your teeth will fucking fall out in a couple more years.
And they're way expensive to put back in your face.
Way more expensive than just brushing your teeth twice a day. Right. And it's more attractive to look at too, which is always a good thing. So that's why I budget, is because it's healthy. Right. Yeah.
But what's interesting about budgeting too is it's almost, I equate it to the greatness tracker. For those of y'all that don't know, the greatness tracker is a sales tool for how many calls you're supposed to make a week and how many people you're supposed to see. And so once you operate off of that sheet for so long, it's almost like you don't really even need to write it down because because the way that you feel when you're on track, like, when you're on track. But more importantly, you also know when you are like way behind. You can feel it. And it's the same thing with budgeting. We're so used to it that I can feel pretty instantaneously when my spending is more than it normally is or should be. You can feel it. You just the number of swipes, the number of whatever.
It's a feeling bad when you drank too much the night before and you wake up and you're
really
like, where did that cat come from that took a crap in my mouth?
Ugh, damn cats.
Damn cats. But yeah, so when I go on the next thing here, separate of like a vacation fund or a spending fund, or separating for a husband and wife to make sure you don't get in each other's controlling issues as far as how to spend money. When you move past that, the beginning was with the end in mind. I think the most important thing in business, which also is business with your own personal money, is if it's a good decision in a bad time, it's a good decision in a good time, right? So it applies most to this group of people that have these fluctuating, inconsistent incomes, that you've got to make emotional decisions before they're emotional. So let me give you an example. By when will you cut bait and run? By when will you sell this thing? By when will you fire an employee? By when will you do these things, right? So let me explain what I mean by that as a business owner with employees. I love my people. In my entire career, I've only had to lay off 4 people ever that were because of my lack of production. It was a horrible experience because 2 of the 4 people, I officiated their weddings. Like, I love these people. It really
doesn't get worse than that.
It doesn't get much worse. I officiate these weddings. But what's interesting is, because I track everything, 90 days before that happened, in general, and this is something for all of us to remember, I knew at what point in production we would have to make a business decision that was healthy for the longevity and life of the business moving forward. And so it was more of a if-then conversation.
And I don't want to interrupt, but I think this is important too. The transparency of metrics and books with a team or with a company of people, with the employees, if you're really transparent about it, it also gives us the ability to know too.
Yep.
Like we know when the shit's going wrong, and it's not so. Not that it doesn't suck any less, but at least you can
There's not as much of a surprise.
You can work harder, or you can start making adjustments in your own life that will come in handy if and when you are the one that gets let go, because you've been watching this trajectory of shit's going downhill. Like so I need to start protecting myself.
Yeah. So I love that you said that, but I think the same thing applies to your household, right? So going back to the budget, I always made the joke of the deferred gratification, once you get your iPhone or your Samsung, you're not going to go back to a flip phone. Yeah. Well, we say that unless you have to. Like there's a point where you have to, not really yet, but until you have to. But cars, car payments, the extra car. So some people have a weekend car because it's fun and they're car people. Well, at what point are you going to say, you know what, I need to get rid of the car, not because it's not paid for, because there's insurance on that car and there's still expenses of carrying, right? Or what that cash would do to offset the other debts.
Or maybe it's taking up space in a garage that you have a storage unit full of crap. Right. So getting rid of that can offset this. I mean,
and this all goes all the way down the road to when do you sell your house? So one thing, let's talk about that one for a second, because it's such a weird conversation. It's weird to me that distressed sale foreclosures actually happen, and why wholesalers are around that can swoop in with 3 days before foreclosure and buy a house in cash at a super discount. And it's because that family didn't come to reality soon enough. Because here's what I mean, but let me give you an example of what all this means. So what happens in every city nationwide is somebody owns a house that's free and clear that they inherited from, their grandma or mother, right? It doesn't even have to be free and clear. It could just have a lot of equity. Okay. And things were great for years and then they're not great, but we love the house. It's grandma's house, or I've been living here forever, or, we'll turn it around, and they start missing payments, but we're going to turn it around, and they don't deal with the problem is they didn't make a decision before it was emotional, because it's always emotional, right? Because if they just made a decision before it was emotional of, hey, if we actually get 30 days behind on a mortgage, we know at 90 days they can foreclose, right? We know on average it takes 30 to 60 days to sell a house and close. So if you're 30 days behind on a mortgage and things aren't looking up, you need to put the house on the freaking market.
Sell it,
Why? Because now at least when you sell it, you get all the equity yourself. And you're starting off your new life, whatever that means to you. Yeah. Even if you rent for a year, at least you got all the cash that you've earned over. And
which was the intention of why that person gave you the house anyway. It's supposed to be a gift.
Right. And even if it's not somebody gave it to you, you've lived there for 12 years.
True, yeah.
And now you've got lots of equity because it's been appreciating nationwide. Well, what ends up happening is people they get emotional about lots of things. I mean, I can't imagine. It could be embarrassment, for selling a house in a community. It could be.
Or how about this? We have to live somewhere.
Yeah, we have to live somewhere.
So why sell the house if we
disruption for the kids?
Yeah.
The real belief you're going to turn around, right? Yeah. The real belief, but all of it comes down to you didn't make a decision early. So going back to the business conversation, so this is what I'm trying to apply at home for this budgeting when you have these inconsistent incomes, right? I know exactly how many loans I have to close per month, and if it drops below that number for more than 2 months in a row, on the third month, it dictates who I've got to let go or how many people I have to let go.
Yeah.
End of story. Now that's an emotional conversation I never want to have.
Sure.
But I know the number because I made the decision unemotionally up front. So I can deal with it if it comes down to it.
Right.
And I'm working to make sure I don't have to do that because I don't want to lay people off.
But you know what? We all know that number too.
Right. And I share that with my team, which goes back to the conversations that are not had between husbands and wives.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times you have a logical person in the household and you have an emotional person in the household.
Yeah.
And they don't converse about money. Or how about this? How many spouses literally don't know how good or how bad finances really are?
Right.
I know this because I see lots of divorces that happen. One spouse is like, holy crap, I didn't even know we weren't paying our bills on time until it was too late. Right.
Right.
And so this goes back to having those important conversations up front while things are good. And then, and even if you didn't do that, and now you're you are listening, you're the one that's like, I know it's bad and probably worse than I think it was. make a decision of if then. If we don't recover by this date, then I will execute A, B, and C to relieve the pressure, to get those expenses down.
Yeah.
Right. My buddy that's in the room, Gabe, that's doing all the back work on this.
Rockstar.
Just bought a house.
Woo woo!
In the
Congratulations.
last couple months. And of course, it's made in the best of times, right? Good income, good credit. He and his wife are excited, and they bought their house. And the advice I'd still give to him, because he's in, he did the right thing. He saved money ahead of time. His credit scores were great. I'm not going to get into your personal details, but the advice I'd give him and anyone else is, you've got to know when to punch out. Like, there's a reason why fighter planes have an ejection seat.
Right.
It's not because that pilot wants to literally let a $1 billion plane go down the ocean.
Right.
But sometimes it's better to let the plane go down than it is for you to go down with it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by start deciding on emotional things before it becomes emotional. Make decisions up front. I think that's the most important thing when I give budgeting advice to people that have these fluctuating incomes.
It all goes back to, you have to be having the conversations though, because if you're
you
not,
have to know your numbers.
You have to know your numbers. And if you're not looking at it, if you're not designating time each month to review things, you don't even know what the answer is. We don't know what the if then scenario is. You really don't know. Typically you look up when shit's way past, there is no other options.
You have a cavity when you start feeling it, not when the cavity started.
Correct. And so the only way to not have that happen is to be looking at it on a monthly basis, so that you can be forced to have these conversations way before. It's almost like going to therapy when you're not fighting.
That's exactly right.
Like, don't go to therapy when you start fighting.
By the way, every marriage counselor will tell you the same thing. Go to marriage counseling while you're happy.
It's
not
maintenance.
To try and fix it when it's too late.
I mean, think about the poor therapists that people come in and you're like, they already hate each other. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this as a therapist? Like, I don't know the backstory. I don't know if they've ever been happy. I don't know how long. Anyway, so I don't know if this was on your list or not, but I want to ask this question. So is it worth setting up a monthly payment, like paying yourself? So putting yourself on some kind of budget, maybe it is your survival number. And so
it's a great idea. I know exactly what you're talking about. So let me explain it in the right way. So if you're self-employed, use realtors as an example. There's tax benefits as well, but you should set it to your help. You should incorporate yourself. The attorney can tell you what type of partnership you should do, and you should pay yourself a salary.
Okay.
And if you're paying yourself a salary, that's a fixed number, regardless if you make more or less than that, you start to manage your budgets out of that, right? And you'll make decisions.
I guess it still doesn't circumvent the, I didn't sell any houses this month, right?
Exactly right. But that way the P&L shows a negative. And when you see the negative for a couple months in a row, but more importantly, it also keeps you from spending it's more about not spending too much when you get the big paycheck, right? So, using that $10,000 a month person, that's really a $30,000 every 3 months person. They're paying themselves $5,000 a month salary.
Then
they're actually managing their life out of $5,000 a month. Right. So in theory, they've got a couple, $3,000, $4,000 that they're paying their bills with, and they're still saving $500 to $1,000 out of that. Then that means that they still have 35% that's going to taxes, and there's still excess that's building reserves.
So they're basically, doing it that way, set yourself up almost like a W-2 employee in a way.
It creates a better mindset like that. And that's the real issue, is that people, when there is no HR department,
right,
and the check just comes in, the mindset is it's all mine. And that's where people get in trouble. Yeah. And they usually don't fix that mindset till they get stung by a big tax bill.
Right? I also think that overspending, when you do get large lump sums of money, come from deprivation or the feeling of being deprived from things that you like you haven't been able to do, whether it's necessary things like a fixing something at your house that really needs to be fixed, or I haven't gone shopping in this amount of time, or I haven't gotten any new work clothes in this so long, right? And so you go out and kind of overindulge. It's like your cheat day, and you just like gorge yourself.
And you blow it.
So I think that has to be a piece of it too, of where that blowing all the money because it's...
The last point about this, and we'll wrap up for the day, is when you really get down to the nut cutting of it and doing the budget, and there's this changing income that's going up and down, if you actually track everything month in and month out, you actually will come up with an average over time.
Right.
Like you can't base it off of the last 30 days or even the last 90 days. Mm-hmm. It's like what happened in spending and savings last year and how they compare to the previous year. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're doing a budget and tracking it long enough, then you know it's not like I have zero questions about paying bills right now. Even if you remove my assets, I'd be able to manage based on my earnings because I know what my average has been for the last couple of years, right? And that
your average earnings.
Average earnings.
Okay.
So if I know what that average earnings is and I decrease it by 30% to be safe, then I can at least rely on that. And I don't care when the money comes in. Like K1s are distributed quarterly, right? They don't, or in some companies annually. So I'm not relying on that money. I know it's coming, but I'm budgeting off of this lower number over the course of the year because I know that what it's averages out to over years of doing it, right? Yeah. So, but it goes back to track, do it consistently, and things work out
this will
better.
be fun to kind of unfold in our personal lives because Randy has 2 jobs that they're self-employed. I mean, they're consistently inconsistent, right? Yep. And so we are just kind of starting to enter that world of we need to start getting taxes set up and we need to, do all of these things. And, how can we really leverage this money because we have operated and built our budget around one single income. And now, so what does that look like, right?
Yep.
Blow it all, party, woohoo! Let's go buy cars and go to Vegas.
Well, I hope this was helpful, guys. Please like, subscribe, and share.
Yes, and send us questions to sigmansense@gmail.com. Anything that you have questions about, want more information on, we'll be sure to get you great answers and also share that on the podcast.
That's right. We'll see you next time on Sigman Sense.
Bye.